Welcome to BioInsights. I'm your host, Marcelo Aller. Today's show, I have joining me is Rocco Boullier. He's the operator coach that turns data into decisions. Specifically, the topic today is going to be about revenue by results. Rocco is the Chief Health Officer at Integrity Health Coaching Solutions, and he's the creator of R.A.M.P. It's a fitness prescription system. I've met Rocco really through LinkedIn, thought it was really great to what his story was. He had similar messaging. So we're going to talk about coaching, scalable operations, helping clubs deliver outcomes to members, and really about managers measuring systems that could help monetize and most importantly, help members with type 2 diabetes, blood pressure, health issues, but also building assessments and programming towards retention, and most importantly, tying it into personal training revenue. So Rocco, welcome to BioInsights. To get us started, I really want to talk about the R.A.M.P system and how it came about and your history with your experience of 2 decades in the industry. So if we could start there.
First off, thank you for having me on the show, which is an honor. It's a great meeting, people like you with like minds to see an issue with what's been going on in the public and how we can be an asset versus being a liability to the situation. So with that being said, yes, we have a huge challenge in this country because in my estimation, before we even get into the fitness sector of this conversation, is that when we take a look at our healthcare problem, 70% plus of individuals are overweight or obese. We can agree upon that, right? I mean, it doesn't take much.
And only 25% are working out.
Right. Yeah. So, and the problem is with that 70%, it's not really a medical problem. It has festered into a medical problem because of the lack of education people have with the foods that we choose to eat every single day, how we exercise or how we don't exercise for that matter, right? Having a country with over 40,000 health clubs that could potentially be a treatment for this condition, we'll call it, that don't do that. And we never did that as a fitness industry since as far back as I can remember. And I come from, joining the Manchester YMCA in 1972 and as a 14-year-old and becoming one of the oddballs that when I went and exercised every single day in the weight room, and it wasn't the norm back then. It didn't really turn into a social event because that's all it really was. It was never really focused on, geez, here's when you take a look at the Bally's back then and, the Gloria Stevens and all this stuff, it was really a uppity social event that was maybe an alternative to actually going out to nightclubs for some of us. So if you weren't really a partier with the alcohol and all that other stuff, these places were actually a pretty fun place to go because you'd meet a lot of nice people. We really didn't have as much of a healthcare problem back then as we do today. Mm-hmm. And it was a place where like-minded, healthier people would congregate, where if you didn't want to go to the nightclubs, that would be an alternative to that. So, but back then it was never a place where people thought, oh boy, I got to go get fit early on. If you were a bodybuilder, you might want to go there because you were going to compete in the local bodybuilding show or powerlifting event or whatever the case may be. And then you had your everyday members that were coming. Most times I can remember back in the days when I was competing that a lot of people would come and actually just hang around to watch me lift, which was kind of odd. But I have old videos of me doing, bench press workouts. And if you look in the background, you see people just leaning on machines, looking over, saying, is this amount of weight going to crush this guy or not? But anyways, I digress. Getting back to the issue that
did originally you set out to solve the health club and what changed? Because there's obviously, you're talking about an issue, right? You're talking about the health issue that you've observed, and you're talking about the population that is working out and that's not working out, and that comorbidities are not something that are genetic. people have had to exercise some type of behavior. So your history and going forward now, obviously R.A.M.P had been developed to originally set out to solve some type of problems. What was the first prototype like?
The evolution of R.A.M.P came as a result of, I went back to college in my 30s because I was in the plumbing and heating trade. As lucrative as it was at the time, I hated it. There was no passion, and I specialized in putting in high-tech heating systems. That was my career prior to going to college. But I always had a passion for exercise and powerlifting. Initially, I went to college to become a strength coach. That was the reason why I went. But at the time that I went, I had already won 5 world titles prior to going to college. And when I would do my list for powerlifting, I always would create my own formula in order to get from point A to point B. So if I wanted to improve my squat, my bench, or my deadlift, I would always have a way of being able to go from where am I today and how far can I get within my training cycles. Mm-hmm. You know, I would create different types of formulas for myself. And then when I went to college, I learned how to use Excel spreadsheet, which I didn't even know how to turn on a computer back then. It was something that was very foreign to me. So once I understood Excel spreadsheet, in my mind one day, I was thinking, wow, I can actually create these spreadsheets and use a squat, a bench, and a deadlift. So when I did clinics back then, I would go to different health clubs and I would teach people how to progress in their lifts with those 3 lifts, and also teach them about nutrition. So when I learned about the Excel spreadsheet stuff, it was easy for me to say, okay, let me just bring a little computer in, put in, say your projected new bench press max was 300 pounds. I'd have a A1 cell that I put the 300 there, and it would do is it would amortize the whole 8 weeks of training and tell you every set, every rep, and the weight, because it wouldn't round up to the nearest 5, would give you basically a decimal point weight. And I said, oh, this is pretty cool because this is going to save me a lot of work when I go to these clinics and do this stuff, so I can do programs with people. And then it dawned on me like, wow, I could actually do this for every single person, never mind just power lifters. And at the time, we were watching the degradation of the human physiology in this time, because it was a time in the 80s where they started bringing more and more sugar, carbohydrates into our food supply. I'll give you an example: SnackWells, low fat, right? Low fat, but loaded with sugar. And people were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. People were eating more bagels than I'd ever seen in my life, right? Every morning it was bagels with cream cheese. People would tell me they're carb loading with a desk job. I'm like, what are you doing? So that's kind of the evolution of what happened. I watched this actually happen, and I'm thinking, this is crazy. And back then we were still talking about the food pyramid.
Yeah.
I consulted with a well-known nutritionist at the time. I'm not going to mention the name, but I took the class to get the certification. I'm not even going to use the he, she thing because I don't want to expose who it is. So I took the class, and then after the class was over, I said, you realize this is garbage, right? And, we had an argument. It was an argument. And they thought that 60% carbohydrate was healthy with 20% protein and 20% fat. I'm going to say, you're going to make every single person overweight with this
provided that they could digest glucose properly and they were not insulin sensitive. That's flash forward now, but I remember that period too. I remember when it was, we were infatuated with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and powerlifting and bodybuilding, and exercise science at that time was exactly like you described it. Linear periodization, so you plan it out. It's a training program as opposed to exercising, right? Because there's those people that went to gyms. So I remember being a trainer on Bally's training floor, and I used to see the regulars. They would look exactly the same, but they would be there because they'd be socializing in a hot tub, or they would be socializing out in the training floor, maybe doing a set and chatting more, to your point. So it was a social thing, which is important in our society still today. And then the nutrition part, you're spot on. I mean, snack well. I think the drug of choice was fen at that time. You know, so like, so so to kind of at that time, R.A.M.P's version one was a screening programming tool. It wasn't yet really a screening tool, right? You
Hmm.
just looked at, I'm going to hit these milestone markers, and you should be hitting these milestone markers, provided you've done your repetitions
Yes.
correctly, your loads correctly, and you've slept and at least ate correctly. And that was kind of what you were trying to preach, a lifestyle behavior.
And it was just an organized way of being able to get from point A to point B without guessing, a GPS, if you will, right? I mean, I could just leave here, my house in New Hampshire, and try to guess at getting to Chicago without having a GPS or a road map, or I could have the road map to get there. And for me, taking a look at the problem that we've created in this country, because we are now overweight and obese, and it's creating so much cost and suffering, I guess, throughout our population. To reverse this problem, we have to reverse what's been done. So when you
Yeah.
take a look at, the foods we ate prior to becoming overweight, we have to go back to that type of eating, right? Healthier foods, more balanced nutrition. I'm not saying carbohydrates are bad or demonize them. I think to some degree we need them, but proteins and fats we need as well. But it's the chemicals that have been interlaced and all the things that have messed up metabolism that's caused much of the dysfunction metabolically with so many people, that they're not using glucose correctly anymore. And as a consequence, instead of burning or using the glucose as energy, it's being stored as fat via the lipogenesis that happens within the livers to create a insulin sensitive person again, so that their glucose is utilized for energy, is going to take some time, which means pulling yourself away from the bad foods that are causing the problem in the first place. And the second most important thing what R.A.M.P is all about is to put more muscle on the individual, because we're not only are we seeing these people are morbidly overweight, but the reality is when we measure them on any type of an analyzer, we see that these people are so under muscled, and muscle is part of your metabolism. So the less muscle you have, the harder and harder it's going to become to actually lose body fat. So our goal is to help people understand through the fitness centers how they can get into a system of treatment. I guess that's a good word for it, because everybody else wants to use the word treatment, but the reality is exercise is a treatment that makes you better. And yeah.
And you mean training though, right? Exercise
Yes.
is, yeah, because I think that's what we need to be more specific in our messaging. I think ACSM, exercise is medicine, got it wrong, in my opinion. It should be training is medicine, because
Yes.
training equals an outcome.
Right.
So how did this impact your business at that time? How did it show up there? I mean, did it
In
help?
my in personally in my business,
Yeah.
when I once I got out of the university and I created the very first version of R.A.M.P. At the time, it was called FlexRx. It was actually a CD-ROM that actually I sold on television. I was almost kind of like a Tony Little-ish kind of a person on television. The problem with back then, this we're talking like the early 2000s, is that understanding progressive overload and hypertrophy and muscular endurance and all that language is so esoteric to too many people that it was hard to dumb that down so that on television people understand that I could have this particular training program that's going to help me. So I ended up selling more of those training CD-ROMs to trainers because they understood what I was talking about. The problem with that is that there was no real money in it to cover my cost. So and eventually what I did is I made a prototype inside of the fitness center. So what was making it difficult for me to sell on television for $59 for a CD-ROM, people were willing to pay me $200 just for me to do the program for them. And I'm like, and I had my V8 moment, right? I was like,
That light bulb moment just went click.
Like, wow. I mean, you don't want to buy this thing for $59 and you can do endless programs. You could have it put it on your computer. You could create your own programs, go do your own testing, come in, put in the data, and when the thing would just beautifully spit out a training mesocycle and like that, right? No, they didn't want to do it. But once I said, well, okay, well, I'll do it for you for $199, everybody still was lined up. And I changed my philosophy on the marketing aspect of it. And as you've probably seen, and I don't know if you see the names that we've given to the R.A.M.P programs now. So we have like a Michelangelo, we have a Gladiator. Those names appeal to people. We have, the Metabolic Boost, the Cardio Crush, the Hyper Blitz, all these things that are kind of exciting to talk about. Initially, I said my hypertrophy program, my strength program, nobody resonated with that.
Yeah, so you have to market a little.
Yeah, so I became a fairly decent marketer as like what button to push. I'll give you a funny story. So I had this female trainer, and she was talking to another female. And there was two programs, and the programs were very similar, but they had different names. And one of them was called the Firm and Tone, and the other one was called Simply Sexy. And it was great. And I'm just sitting back and I'm watching this conversation take place because my trainer was saying, okay, well, which one do you want? And she was, well, I don't know, which one do you think I should have? They were very similar. They kind of did the same thing. The only difference really was the name. And they went back and forth for, I don't know, about 10 minutes. And finally I got frustrated. I said, Dawn, I go, look at this woman. I go, she definitely wants the Simply Sexy. And the woman right away goes, yes, that's the one I want. But she was afraid. She was afraid to say that's what she wanted. Because she wanted to be simply just sexy, right? Because there's that part that's connected to feeling healthy and good. It's like the being attractive thing too, right? So, Firm and Tone was okay. I hear some people say, well, I'll start off at the Firm and Tone and work my way over to the Simply Sexy. I'm like, there is no working. They're just two different programs. There was no working it. But in her mind, her subconscious told her that her self-esteem wasn't worthy of that name, which was really interesting to look at. And the things we learned about human behavior was really, really interesting, because I think that's a big part of our problem today, is that people have given up a little bit on their own self-esteem. It's like they just throw their hands up and say, I surrender. And I think a lot of that's happened.
Instant gratification is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Change is not automatic. Change takes a time, discipline, consistency, measuring. So like from a workload standpoint, how did it impact your staff? Because you kind of mentioned having trainers, but then also how does that communicate across utilization wise to your facility, let's say for a member? Like obviously Simply Sexy and Firm and Tone had a specific amount of utilization for the facility, right? And it was based on the questions you asked those members. But then how did it help a trainer's workload as well? Two different questions, but I think are pertinent.
Yeah, well, all right. Let me take a step back and let me tell you what the current and still some of the current model today. Say, for example, we have a 2,000 member club. And that 2,000 member club, because of the cost of personal training and sometimes the effectiveness of personal training, you're going to penetrate, say, I'll be generous and say 5% of the member base, okay? That 5% is opting for personal training. So now we have, what do we have? 100 people now that are willing to purchase personal training. Now I'm a gym owner and I'm looking at this 100 people that we're making some profit on, but a big cost goes back to the trainer because it costs a lot to make that happen. I have 1,900 members now that are left to their own devices. What other business model do you know of that you can service 5% of your clients and be successful? Can you name me one?
And you're talking about on demand, where the member gets the programming because they've already been. It's kind of like a semi-private type of approach, right? You give them the workout generated, You walk them through the exercise order and the types of exercises they're going to do because, like it or not, folks, periodization takes discipline and consistency. You don't have to, unless for if you're bored, you might want to vary a couple of movements. I understand that, but it takes time. So you can benefit by doing almost the same thing 2 to 3 times a week over 8 weeks, focused intensity with dose to get those outcomes. And to your point, it doesn't require necessarily all the workload of a staff. It could be done semi-private. So to your point, that 5% is done with very low workload unless they want the coaching, unless they've progressed and are moving to a different area of your gym floor that requires more supervision and a coaching and trainer's eye on them to be able to maximize that outcome.
It's true, and there's some people who've been in the gym, the ones that look the same over the last 30 years, but at least they know the movements. There's some people who don't know the movements that would benefit greatly from having a front-end loaded program that at least teaches them the movements so that they can progress if it's a program that they're following, right? So if it's a progressive overload program they're following, at least they know the movement enough with the coaching. Whereas those who've been doing those movements for 2 or 3 decades, we just have to give them a plan. We can make them better as well. So it's, there's twofold there. And secondly, when you have a program that's affordable on the front side, after a person has become a little bit more familiar with everything that's going on with their program, they're more likely to purchase coaching after the fact because they don't feel like they're getting scammed on the front end because there's so much skepticism when, you join a gym, you're paying whatever it is you pay for your membership. And then all of a sudden you get this free consult, and everybody knows that's a way of being able to upsell you into something that's going to cost you an arm and a leg, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you can take that fear out of it and say, okay, we're not going to upsell you into that big $2,000 package that maybe we can give you something that maybe costs $50 more per month, right? That's an easier pill to swallow. And with R.A.M.P, we actually give 100% money back guarantee. So there's actually zero risk. The only caveat is to the client is that you have to show up 3 times per week and actually do what's on your program. And if you do that every single time, and we've literally have hundreds of thousands of people that have already used the program, we've never given back a penny. Because you can't fool the science. You're just not going to fool the science. Even if your nutrition is somewhat poor, as long as you're getting a fair amount of protein, you're gonna change your physiology.
So the quality across multiple sites can be maintained. You bring up an important thing, accountability. How do you account for that? Do they document it?
You mean as far as within the gyms?
Yeah.
They have to check in. So if they checked in, that's all we really care about. If they keep checked in and actually went over and just checked their workouts and didn't do it, I mean, that would be kind of ridiculous, and we probably would give them their money back. But people are generally pretty honest, and we've watched the people who have not done so good who actually come in for their updates. They actually still did good, but not as good as they would have done. And they're honest, and they're saying, I missed a workout here and I missed a workout there, or I didn't eat very well this week, or things of that nature. And they've never come back and say, it's your fault, because they take responsibility for their own actions. So that's what we're seeing.
And let's, like, medical adjacent type of situations, how does this service a population that has those comorbidities or that might be on a medication? How does that service this group? For example, hypertension, heart issues, or they're on a GLP.
We just actually one of the, and I can actually tell you his name. He's on our board just like you are. His name is Richard Ship. He is on a GLP-1. I think it's a semaglutide or semaglutide or whatever way people pronounce it. He's been on it for the better part of 6 months. Lost 50 pounds.
Huh.
Now, one of the side effects of these GLP-1 agonists is muscle loss, right? Anywhere between 20 to 50%. Within
Yeah.
those 6 months, of all the 50 pounds he lost, he gained 1 pound of muscle, which
Well,
is which is fantastic, right? I mean, the problem that we're going to see with these GLP-1 receptor agonists is that people are losing the weight, but the problem is they're losing metabolism, and when they go revert back to their normal eating habits, it's going to be a yo-yo like you've never seen before. Not to mention the other massive side effects of these peptides.
yeah.
We don't even know. We don't
Yeah.
have no longitudinal studies on any of the stuff that we can really predict what's going to happen. We're seeing, events of thyroid cancers and people digestive problems that is partially paralyzed, the small intestine and the colon to some degree. That, how do we treat that afterwards? I have no answer for that. I'm an exercise person. I'm not a medical person, but my goal is to help as many people as possible not have to have it become a medical problem. So when you increase muscle mass, automatically you're treating diabetes, automatically you're treating hypertension, right? All these things, because when you increase muscle tissue, you have more what's called like there's like GLUT2 and GLUT4 receptor sites that are able to utilize glucose even more efficiently, right? So there's less glucose that's remaining in the bloodstream and more that's being put into the muscle. We call them, it's a glucose sink, right? So we're able to treat diabetes that way. When we increase capillarization through exercise, and all these things happen too, we also increase the amount of vascular tissue, which is going to decrease pressure as well, right? So if you have a bigger hose, you have less pressure within the hose, right? All these things are part of even de-stressing. Exercise is a great de-stressor post-exercise. Nobody ever leaves a workout being angry. You always feel good. So therein lies, all the chemicals that happen in your brain, all your neurotransmitters, your dopamine, your
Yeah.
serotonin, your acetylcholine, all these things that are having this beautiful dance within the physiology that helps people become healthy. Myokines, when you contract a muscle, that are released, and they actually do things. They release what are they called? BDNFs within the brain to help the
Yeah.
brain actually recover its nervous system as well. So you look at all the benefits of what this does treatment wise for people, does reverse so many things. I've reversed so much type 2 diabetes in the history of my career. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to work hand in hand with the medical community, because we're like this, because they're all about, when's the next prescription, and we're about like, once you get off that prescription, right?
Yeah.
We have to come to a bridge where I guess the doctors have to be remunerated for keeping somebody healthy, right? And then working in conjunction with the fitness centers so that those can be the therapy centers for the people who you're talking about, that deconditioned population that's, just on the edge of becoming sick, or maybe slightly overweight, but not totally morbidly obese yet, because I don't know if we have the capacity to do that yet. But the more people we have healthy, the more care can be given to those who really need the care as well.
Yeah, you're seeing that today, slowly changing, right? You're starting to see medical doctors actually not only understand the plumbing, but actually understand how to fix that plumbing and how to improve the plumbing of the individual, especially like just an example of heart health, right? It's, how do you improve someone's VO2? How do you improve someone's cardiac output? Most doctors at that time would just say exercise, but here's a pill. And today, I think the first line of defense is what can we do to modify that behavior? But to your point, there's always been an issue with referral, because a doctor goes and gets so much schooling, and our industry, depending upon which certification, is still not completely respected. And I think that's evolved and changed today. It's taken so long, though, because a lot of the same problems we're still talking about. How do you now, you're on a program, I'm on a R.A.M.P program. What are the touch points? What are the messaging? And what are some progressive visuals that I get if I'm on a R.A.M.P program? How does
Well,
it work?
intake, the intake of creating a program is done on some gyms use a Staiku analyzer, some will use an Evolt. There's different types out there. A lot of the clubs up here actually use another system called InBody. But regardless of what piece of equipment you're using, I'll just use the InBody for instance up here because I actually see it a lot. We actually get a reference starting point with an individual. So we're taking their weight, we're taking their blood pressure, we actually do oxygen saturation post COVID, um, body fat percentage, and actually body weight goal. That's what our body composition goal. We look at all those for starters because we have to have a progress report over the 8 weeks to say, okay, well, after after that training period or that mesocycle, if you want to call it that, we have to be able to show them that they went into the right direction. And if they went in the wrong direction, we need to know that as well. But more times than not, what we're seeing is so that we put them in the right direction. So they go through that measurement process. And then the second step is to evaluate what their muscular output is at that particular point in time. No different than powerlifting. If my bench press max was 315, that's what it was on that day. Well, if I want to be at 350, there has to be a way for me to get there. Okay, no different than anybody who's training just to be able to be more and more fit because it's the same exact process. So once we take those metrics, those biological metrics, then we take them into a place where we set it up so it's easy in the beginning. So we have all selectorized pin selected equipment that basically works every single muscle group for that person. And depending on the condition of that individual, we may only have them do a one circuit 3 times per week, where somebody's a little bit more conditioned, maybe 2 or 3 times through the circuit. But the reality is, what we do is we start off with the chest press. What we do is, in order to be able to non-invasively find out what their 1 rep output is without actually making them do a 1 rep max, we put the pin down somewhat heavy until they can actually push the weight. We keep putting the pin up. So say, for example, I put it at 100 and they can't move it. I might move it to 80 and they might be able to get 3. Anywhere between 1 and 10 repetitions, wherever they fail via their own volition, we take that data, and once I send you the iPad with all the stuff that I'm going to send to you, you'll be able to see this yourself. So if we put in, say, 3 with 80, it's going to give us what that 1 rep max output is. Once we do that for every single movement, so if we're doing the chest and we do the back, we'll do the shoulders, the triceps, the biceps, the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes, and all that other stuff in the core. Once we've actually gathered all that data and analyzed what their 1 rep max is estimation wise, then we can apply an algorithm that says, okay, do we want this person with more hypertrophy? Do we want more strength? Do we want muscular endurance? So we created formulas that range the intensity or the duration of sets and repetitions to max what the objective should be. So if it's hypertrophy, it's going to be a little bit of higher repetition, a little bit lighter weight. Whereas if it's strength, the repetition is going to be down, the weight's going to be a little bit heavier, and muscular endurance is a little bit the other way after hypertrophy. So we have those different ranges of formulations that we can use, or we can use a combination of both. Because if you're in the system itself on a particular exercise, if you want one to just be strength and you want another one to be endurance and the rest of it's hypertrophy, you can manipulate it that way too. So once we gather this data, once it's in the system, within less than a minute, we can calculate 8 weeks of training that will tell them every set, every rep, how much weight to use. It'll tell them through Carbone formula what their heart rate should be over the next 8 weeks as well, based upon percentages, so that the person's always working at a percent gradient better than they were the prior week before that. So as the intensity increases, we're using the progressive overload naturally to make that happen. But at the 8th week, because we know that there's a principle of diminishing return, that's going to happen somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks. So we just kind of calculated 8 weeks as a standard for the way that we do it. Then we'll actually bring them back in and we do what's called a program update. And that program update brings them back through the same exact process, back on the InBody. We look at all those metrics again. And then whether they stay on the program on that particular program or a different one, the testing procedure is exactly the same. And they would go into that new testing procedure. And again, in the following 8 weeks, you go back into the in-body. So there's a consistent monitoring of the progress of that individual. Most clubs, they call them the KPIs, which is, the key performance indicators, and it's all based upon money. In the fitness industry, it doesn't really work that way, because unless we have KPIs, I mean, the P means progress of our member, we're losing our members. So the KPI is kind of a dual meaning for the fitness industry, that if you do not get your members in a situation where not only could you service the ones that you have, but also create a reputation for helping people who are struggling, right? Those people still hesitant to come into the clubs because they don't know there's anything there that will actually help them. People are desperate. And if they know there's someplace that they could really go and it's guaranteed, you're going to get better as long as you do your part. In other words, the accountability has to be there. You're going to reap the rewards of actually becoming your own health advocate. And that's the whole idea behind what R.A.M.P is. Not so much for, yes, the industry does need a better system within its walls to service its customers, but we're really missing on a huge opportunity to help those who don't even come to our clubs yet, because they need us even more.
Yeah, you're defining really a checklist, right? The site, the space, the staff, the competency of the facility, the equipment, locally, if they have partners or not in there, and then, having this kind of checklist in your mind, which you hope every single facility has, it keeps outcomes more consistent. And I think that's what a well-run facility that has those dashboards, those KPIs that they could review. So they know, hey, I got my staff all set up with, they sign a member on, they get these services, they get walkthroughs, they get, at least this semi-private type of service where, hey, if you can do it on your own, here you go, and here's a recommended even eating regimen that you can take advantage of. You said you wanted to do this, and then it helps one. Provide some type of consistent, besides membership dues, an opportunity to do, to your point, if it's a tiered membership service where they get this as part of their membership, this program design, and if they want to do one-on-one services, that even offers a lot more of an opportunity. So, how should a club sequence these without really overwhelming a staff? Because the difference is, when I think the earlier years, like you defined, many people were wanting to be in this environment more and more. And I think post-pandemic, it has drastically changed that industry. So how do you do it without overwhelming a staff in a sensible 12 to 24 month type?
Yeah, that is a challenge. It's a good question, because the margins are so low in the fitness industry to begin with. There isn't much room payroll-wise to get the staff that you would like to have. And I don't mean that in a negative way or try to disdain people who work inside the fitness facilities. But, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, you walk into a fitness facility, what are you going to see there? You're not going to see somebody with your background there ready to help somebody, because they can't pay you what you'd have to be paid in order to take care of their clients. So there's one hurdle for the industry itself. And the reason why I created the R.A.M.P system was that all the science that you and I have known since the beginning of our educations is built into the program itself. So when you take a look at individuality, progression, overload, specificity, diminishing return, as long as you learn how to actually just put in the data, all that science is abided by without you having to have the education. I'm not saying that's the best way to go about it, but some of the programs, like the ones that are circuit training programs, those could be done by those types of people that you see at the front desk. And then you have your more complex programs with much more complex movements that would need somebody who's more educated in that movement specifically, like teaching a squat or a deadlift or a pull, something like that takes knowledge to be able to do that. As a CSCS, we learned all those things, but you going to find that in an HVLP model? Absolutely not, right? So you have to sometimes. What I recommend for them is to do only half the grant program. In other words, the simpler programs to get started. It's like getting into grade school, whether it's your staff or your client, right? You got to put them in the first grade if they're first graders. If the gradient's too high, you're going to have a failure rate, right? So getting people to do the most simplest things first, right? You go from simple to more complex, right? Crawl, walk, run. It's the same thing. It's the same thing in almost everything in life. So you have to look at this situation and say, what do we have to work with? Can we do the first step first? And the first step first is to be able to say, okay, well, can we get my staff trained on doing the most basic programs? And the first 3 programs we have in R.A.M.P are so basic. I taught an HVLP group, a bunch of them too. Within 4 hours, we taught them how to use the program and how to sell the program. So I sell that, by selling, how to talk to people about giving a solution to their problem. People think I have to sell something. Well, it's not something. If you walk into a fitness center with a problem, like, whether it's hypertension, obesity, whatever, the diabetes, all the things we talked about, and you say, why are you here? What is it that we can help you with? And I say, well, I just got diagnosed with diabetes, my blood pressure, blah, blah, blah. And you say, I have something I can help you with. That's not a sale.
Yeah.
It's just not a sale. See, you have to get out of that. Oh, I got to sell one more membership, because we're so numbers driven on memberships. And once that happens, we forget about the customer, right? Well, look at the attrition rate. Look at our participation rates, right? And then we want to cry that we're struggling for money. Wow. You get what you pay for, right?
Yeah. You can't just build it and have it and not expect them to come without actually delivering something. I think we have to understand that service comes with the facility. So you have to have that one metric, that you want to baseline every day with people, and it could be those soft skills that you're talking about is, having a series of questions, be able to better frame an experience. They don't feel like they feel like you're a guide or a partner towards that journey that they're going to take.
Yeah.
So, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's establishing that, intake, the assessment. What are some?
We've documented all that in a quick start manual. So it's really step by step, and we made it really easy. Click here, stop here, pop this here. It's so simple. I don't want to say even a caveman can do it, but I guess that's the first thing that comes to mind. It's just that simple to make that happen. And we've been able to do that over and over again for quite a few fitness facilities that we're in right now. And I still think that it's just the tip of the iceberg as far as fitness prescription is concerned, because I believe that the companies out there or the clubs that are out there that are just hoping that people join and stay, that's history. That's never coming back.
Well, I look at this R.A.M.P as a solution to at least bare minimum to digitize the space that's last to be digitized at this time, which is your weight room, your strength training area. You're starting to see it be digitized, and we acknowledge that the future is going to look very different because we have those 4 generations now playing in this space. And our largest community is that Gen Z. So they will make this investment. They want to get stronger. They want to, but they're not motivated like the 80s and 90s people were. They're not going to sit there and, they're a very different group. So you're seeing also different modalities change. CrossFit's failure. CrossFit's success was adding intensity back into the mix. Their failure became leadership driven, that just really failed at being able to stick to message and became a tone that should not have been said or done. But those are business models that are the example of focus on what was done right. You have so much competition. You have low price, you have high price premium solutions, you have studios and boutiques, but they all offer, at the end of the day, an experience with an outcome that's expected. And I think if you dial it in with a standardized solution and teach training as a outcome, it's a no-brainer. It's proven to work in several different types of footprints. You don't have to be. I've operated. I was kind of spoiled. I'm a Northeast kid that, ran. I ran the total. I ran basically vertical clubs, and I ran Equinox fitness clubs. Mm-hmm. So I got to see two different models, right? I got to see the high-end Bally's type of version, then the premium Equinox version. And in servicing them and then being in the industry for 25 years, working with Golds, working with Orange Theory, working with all these clubs, it still is that revenue model built on membership. But the ones that do understand personal training, they can see ancillary revenue anywhere from the industry average is 3 to 5%. But the ones that really excel, the Equinoxes, the Lifetime Fitnesses, I've seen anywhere from 15 to 30%. So I don't understand, if I was an owner and operator, and not to just install something, because everyone gets equipment out of the implementation process of, I want to compete, so I will get this in-body solution, or I will get this type of treadmill, or I will get this type of Olympic lifting platform. But I think you need to understand, you need to have a system before you get an equipment. And yeah.
Look at the equipment we've had for decades. The latest version of the same thing that people failed on.
Yeah. And they've ruined it in some cases.
Right.
Like the preacher curl or the leg extension. Like if the guys that know it, they refer back to the old products. Oh, do you remember the Cybex Eagle line? Or do you remember, certain standard old school, like even a leg press is kind of just been, so those are, yes, we're kind of dating ourselves in that regard. But I think the point is that sometimes you don't need to have the shiniest object. You need to have a clean facility. You need to have working equipment. But more importantly, you need to have a message about training and outcome that I think, if you do that, your community will be there. And I think if you look at some of these successful models that have survived and some that have fizzled out, that's kind of been their success. They've been there because they've implemented solutions. And I think today data matters. People want to see it. They want to be able to see it, and they want the ease of use, either through a phone, or through some type of wearable, or, and have that connection. And the staff needs to feel comfortable with being able to deliver something like this. So as, kind of what I hope that people got out of this today is really that as a model, R.A.M.P really provides revenue by results, because it's not reinventing what you should already have. It's just standardizing it with a simple operation through software that allows me to document my assessment, standardize that assessment. And you're assessing not just anything, you're assessing stuff that's normative data that I can compare, my blood pressure, my SpO2. Even if I wanted to do girth measurements, or you didn't talk about it, but you could also do blood work, and you could also do hormones, documented hormones, if people are wanting to track that as well. So there's a whole other side of this too on the R.A.M.P platform that I was really impressed with. And the other part of this is the programming. It's there. It helps standardize. It helps me. So if I have a new trainer and I want to teach them Program Design 101, here you go. And then as that trainer gets better, there's a career path. Intake, yes, it can be done by a front desk person. And that's great, because that provides a career path for that individual if they want to go down that path. So it's kind of piecing these things together as an owner and operator, because, to your point, staff is always going to be a challenge. It's not going to go away. And then also a trainer that could also sell their knowledge and just create programming and be reimbursed for programming. That doesn't take time. That doesn't require them being 8 to 12 hours at a facility all day and not really make the revenue or money that they would desire. It can be done in an ethical way. And I just feel like I think that's nice to hear. I think that's a great service that R.A.M.P could provide and part of the larger community of Massa as well.
Yeah, we're doing it now, and we're growing at a good rate, almost a little bit of a scary rate, but it's all good. But you're right. It's about providing solutions and education so that we indoctrinate our communities in what it takes to become and stay healthy, to be resistant to a lot of the diseases that are out there, and improving quality of life, and then being able to be parents who are able to teach that same philosophies to their kids and then their kids down the road, and not go in the direction that we've gone the last few decades. It's been pretty south. We got to get back north again and provide people with the right education, the right support, and programs that actually deliver real solutions.
So if people want to find out a little bit more about R.A.M.P, where do they go?
Well, if you go to our website, which is www.rampgym.com, you'll find a lot of information, especially if you're a club owner there. Yes, there's a section if you're in a place where you cannot find a club or trainer that will do a R.A.M.P program for you. We'll provide you with somebody who can actually do it online for you. Don't really offer that as a regular service yet, but people who are in need, we always will take care of anybody who contacts us. But if you want to know more about what's happening from the perspective of the outcomes that we've watched, literally thousands of people posting on our Facebook page, which is R.A.M.P by Gym Doctor, you can see a plethora of people day after day holding up they hold up their in-body scores, or they hold up their workout cards. Everybody does the R.A.M.P pose, which is cute as all hell. I don't know if you've seen it or not. We see no matter what fitness condition they're in, when they get their program, everybody does this. Everybody's done it. Whether they have muscles or not, it doesn't matter. They feel so good doing it. And just watching that whole thing take place has been, and we only did it almost by accident. We started the page, and it was actually Eric who did it. Started the page, and Eric was the one that said, let's just go up there and do a double bicep. So Eric would do it, and then the person who was on the program would do it, and it just caught on. And now people go, when they do their updates and when they take their picture, they go, can I do the R.A.M.P pose? It's kind of neat to see that happen, but it's not. It's a double bicep. They call it the R.A.M.P pose, which is neat. So to watch people just become more and more confident as their health changes is just amazing. It's an emotional currency that you can't get out of a dollar bill. It's that cool.
And if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, even on rampgym.com, if you want to send in a contact form there, it'll come right to us, and we'll answer any questions or concerns you might have.
I'll make sure to include that in our show notes. I really enjoyed this. It's a little bit about history, but also a little bit about a system that people need to be more aware of. I'm glad to hear about the organization. I'm glad to be a part of it as well. So I look forward to our next talk, and really, thanks for taking the time out.
Thanks, Marcelo. I appreciate you being on the team. It feels good.
All right, let me see. There, it stopped.